Architecture is a very slow profession. It will take a huge amount of time to reach this particular point where you have a certain experience, and our education fails us in a lot of ways. It doesn't teach us to engage with a lot of aspects within the practice. So you will take time to learn all those things, and it is a good journey. It's a very fun journey if you are enthusiastic about building and architecture and the outcome of the whole project and seeing your whole design. Like the best part about being an architect is you have certain things in your head. You have this whole idea that I want this space to feel this way, and you work 5-6 years towards that, and finally when that space comes into picture and you're able to walk through that and you are able to present it to people, that is the kick, that is the dopamine rush which architects get at the end of the day, and that is something worth living for, I feel. One person cannot be an expert in everything. It should not be that way, it cannot be that way, because things have become too complex. For example, projects which have engineering challenges like this have become too complex. One person does not have the expertise to deliver on those particular things. So you need a large team of consultants, and you need to work with those consultants without losing the vision of the project. So for example, this particular temple, in the temple பண்றதுக்கு it had to be in a traditional form. So on the form we have tried to get it through a parametric software. So அதில் model பண்ணி this particular shape, and then it was fabricated through small machines, CNC machines, and then each of these elements were fabricated and using hand fabrication tools on site to bring this entire form. So even though it is a traditional form, we have used low cost materials and methods of making to bring out this particular architectural form in this area. So that is the highlight of this particular temple, and this forms a centerpiece of the entire project. So there's a large grand staircase which is there on the back side, through which you climb up and then access this temple from here. So all the events, everything happens focusing this particular temple here. Traditional methodலையும் இருக்கணும், at the same time modern outlookக்கும் இருக்கணும் அப்படின்ற அந்த ஒரு ஃபீல்டில் கொண்டு வரதுக்காக what we have done is that we have explored this particular tubular sections which are very low cost materials, low cost methods of doing things, and we have used the parametric software to model this shape, and then the CNC cutting machines cut these material members in the exact same size which is required for bringing this form, and then it was numbered, brought onto site and hand fabricated here. So you have this corbelled feel which is there for this temple, and there are these small pivots or pins which are there which gives that gap between them. So that gives this whole form, and each of these materials is members are stepping back to give this graceful form for the entire temple. The base is made out of concrete and then cladded with granite to bring that whole monolithic feel. So the entire temple has this grey form which is like what our traditional temples used to have, and we have used completely modern methods of expressing that in this particular space. So this is the center part of that entire temple. This kind of capsulates what we are trying to do in this particular project. So this is the main space which we have designed for this project. This is the marriage hall or the main convention hall, which is where the entire event happens here. So if you see this particular space, there is a lot of thought which has gone into each element, and the main aspect of this particular project is the roof of this particular space. So here what we have is that we have this curved metal roof, and the engineering aspects of this roof, or the bones of the roof, are expressed very clearly. So all the lighting elements which you see, the strip light, is done in such a way that it highlights the bones of that particular structure where the trusses are located. And between these bones of the structure, we have these uplights which are highlighting the metal roof at all. So that creates this whole aspect of highlighting the entire elements which go into making of this particular project. We have not done a full false ceiling hiding the entire structure, but the structure itself becomes a part of the visual ornament which we have. And besides that, all the services are loaded into the ceiling in such a way that they are surrounding these trusses. So your HVAC lines, your firefighting lines, your lighting lines, all these are running in the ceiling, and all of them have to be coordinated in such a way that brings this whole beautiful visual effect across the entire project. Now what you see here is an acoustic panel. So this entire wall here is not just a visual element, but it is also an acoustic element. So each panel is a slit wood panel which has a certain sound absorbing capacity. So, and also all these grey panels are fabric panels. So we have alternated these materials to bring about that visual or acoustic comfort within the hall. Besides that, what you see here are CNC cut murals. These are traditional Dasavadaram elements, like you have your all the different avatars, 10 avatars here, and all of them are cut in CNC aluminum panels backlit with LED lights, and they form the entire graphic element on this particular project. And they are also there to break the monotony of this entire scale, bring in a certain touch of traditional element, and at the same time using modern techniques we have executed that. So this ramp is the one which takes you directly into the first floor. So it leads you from the road and into the top, and it has this large pergola which traverses this entire volume and then drops off the guests at the entrance into the hall here. So this is one of the highlights of this particular hall, and the flow of traffic is designed in such a way that this takes care of the upward traffic, and there's one more parallel ramp loop which is there on the outside which takes care of the downward traffic on the other side. So that takes care of the ground floor traffic, and this takes care of the first floor traffic. So this we have designed it as a large, experiential area for the entire project here. So this panel which you see here is a completely reclaimed panel. So it was brought out from another area which was about to be demolished, and it has been brought here and refurbished and then fitted into this place. So there are a lot of elements like this which have been brought in from outside, where we have saved a lot of cost and brought in a touch of small traditional elements without compromising on the cost aspect of the whole project. So this is a simple motif which we have done at a very low cost using a material called GFRG, glass fiber reinforced gypsum. So this gives the flexibility of molding that panel in whichever form we want, and we have given simple LED lights on the inside to highlight this particular motif. So these kind of elements break the whole space down and give that, create that whole illusion of these small rich elements which are very cheap to make. So that is one of the other elements which we have brought into this project. So this is the mini hall. Here what we have done is that this entire hall needed to be illuminated, and at the same time sound needed to be controlled. So again we have thought of an innovative low cost material which is a CNC cut panel which has these simple triangular patterns, and there is a strip light which is hidden within that. So what it acts like is that it creates this whole chandelier effect for the entire hall at a very low cost, and at the same time breaks the sound down without creating too much of reverberations and echo within the space. So this creates a highlight for this dining hall space which is there in the ground floor also, which can be also used as a separate event space, which is used predominantly for these small functions like birthday parties and Shashtapta Purtis and those kind of functions. So the question which has been asked was, what can students learn by studying a project like this? Number one, they can understand how to work within a tight constraint of a land parcel and how to maximize the amount of buildable volume within that. Number two, on terms of material innovations, how you can use materials to bring their expressive nature and how to express the traditional feel using contemporary materials, contemporary methods of processing, those things. Third thing is about how to be very cost sensitive in design. How to use materials in such a way that they bring that whole rich look without bringing too much of expensive, increasing the budget in a big way. So we can make very great looking projects on a very tight budget like this particular GKS hall. That is one of the biggest learnings which we have had in this project. No, I would say that there is certainly no increase in cost in the project outcome. By having consultants who are experts in their own domain and bringing them onto a particular project of this nature, of this complexity rather, they are able to bring in a lot of value to the client. They are able to bring down the cost of the particular project in a big way. They are able to save on the life cycle cost. That is not something which a lot of architects consider when designing a project. And therefore, there is a lot of cribbing which goes on behind the scenes where the client complains, okay, this is costing me so much to maintain. So that doesn't happen when you have very good consultants on board, because they are experienced, they know exactly where it is going. For example, the air conditioning consultant in this particular project, we had gone through almost 4 different systems, shortlisted one, and that system had to be value engineered further in such a way that it could be done in such a way that it brings down the life cycle cost of the entire project also. And that is very important. You cannot, one person cannot be an expert in everything. It should not be that way, it cannot be that way, because things have become too complex. things which I would like, for example, projects which have engineering challenges like this have become too complex. One person does not have the expertise to deliver on those particular things. So you need a large team of consultants, and you need to work with those consultants without losing the vision of the project. That is where the architect is involved, and the client appreciates that. The client appreciates the fact that the architect is willing to bring in experts from different fields, make them sit across the table, make them deliver on that particular thing, and then deliver an end product which has the conceptual crux which they are expecting, at the same time works and costs very less, and works in such a beautiful manner that it is a pleasure to sit inside, and it's a pleasure to have such a project in their portfolio. So that I would say is very important. You cannot become like Ayn Rand's Howard Roark, or like one single hero architect who knows everything. That can't happen. You have to let your ego down, and you have to listen to consultants, and you need to work with them. You need to be a team player. That is very important. And the client will understand the cost aspect when they are seeing the long term part of the project. When they see the life cycle of the project, when they see the construction costs going down because you have all these experts on board, then they see the value of bringing in a big team of people into a project. You wouldn't believe that this project has been completed on 2000 rupees per square feet of built up area, including interiors. So this entire project cost 20 crores. So the cost of this project is completely based on the fact that there's so much of value engineering which has gone into this entire project. So behind the scenes, there's a lot of work which has been done by the consultants and by architects, listening to consultants and bringing all those feedbacks on the board, that we've been able to bring a project on a very tight budget. Actually, it has been a very tight budget to work around in this particular project. So within that budget, how do I bring in, and the elements which you see behind you and all these are this particular mural is a salvaged mural. So this is not something which was made. This was salvaged from a junkyard. And the one which is behind you is a GFRC mural which costs very less to make, because it's just ordinary gypsum reinforced. So it's the design itself, it's the motif and the lighting which we have done, which brings in. And we need to know what are the low cost elements which we can bring in. For example, if I take you inside the dining hall, I can show you a lighting feature which is also a sound control mechanism, which is again very low cost to make, but it brings out a beautiful effect inside the hall. So like a hall needs a chandelier or some kind of a lighting fixture. So by doing that, we were increasing the cost of that particular space. So to avoid that from happening, we have designed a baffle system which is CNC cut, and that itself brings out the lighting effect and reduces the sound reverberations inside. So there are a lot of innovations like this which are on several scales which has been done across the entire project on the built up area, including the basement. So this is a 1 lakh square feet project including the basement. So including the basement, the overall built up area is 1 lakh square feet. So this project was done in 20 crores. So the whole thing comes out to around 2000 rupees per square feet on the whole built up area. That is also because of the fact that these are large span spaces and there's repetition. So that is also bringing down the cost. In a house, there are too many uncontrollable items. Here there's a large team of construction management experts, and most of it has repeated elements across the entire project. And when you buy in bulk for a large project like this, there's obviously a big discount which the client can avail, and there are a lot of aspects which are finer aspects which we can play around with. We are slowly moving as an organization, and we have quite a few large projects in the office right now. So predominantly most of them are gated communities and large housing projects, and few of them are malls which are in tier 2 cities. Few of them are schools which are there, which we are doing in certain areas. So in terms of scale, we have kind of moved up and scaled our organization, and we have certain experts in our office who are capable of handling those scales. And we are growing, we are learning, and we are slowly growing out of the young architect mold, moving into the next middle-aged architectural mode. So yes, we are having a lot of fun in the office in terms of growing there. And we have still remained a consultancy, so we have not taken up execution of any work. So we purely work on the consultancy model, and it is mostly passion driven. Sometimes we work very late, sometimes we take a big break. So we kind of work with that passion of delivering on good design within our studio. And it has worked well for us. What I would say is, taking into account the amount of young architects who are graduating every year, lot of them seem to lose their focus with respect to architecture and deviate into other areas which are more remunerative. Like for example, in the last 5 years, I've seen this trend of people moving away from architecture and going into interior execution. So a lot of these young architects have set up beautiful factories which are capable of executing and delivering on products. And I see on the other end, they have become Insta content creators and they have become social media stars, and there is a different level in which they are growing. So there's a lot of activity happening in architecture and new graduates which is outside of the realm of architecture, which is very important, and that needs to be recognized, that needs to be brought out into the fore. And we need to, as architects, understand that we cannot constrain ourselves to one particular way of doing things or one traditional way of doing things. That has become outdated. So we need to explore all these multiple aspects, and organizations like the IAA and COA need to understand the fact that architecture in its traditional form and the way it has been practiced is slowly becoming unviable. It needs to change. There has to be a drastic change in the way we practice architecture and approach all these things. Why can't an architect become a developer? Or why can't an architect become a contractor who is capable of having a factory and executing their works? This is happening. So everything is there around us. Why is it that the regulating bodies which we are so constrained by are not seeing that, or not giving importance, or not bringing that to the fore, is something which is very worrying on one end, and something which is like so the young architects are kind of losing focus with respect to what is architecture. Now that being said, the architect is someone who is an intellectual. So we are doctors of society in some way. So like how doctors and lawyers have a certain professional ethic and certain way of protecting a certain profession, we also have that responsibility. But these multiple modes which are happening in the practice are slowly diluting that, and we are losing our stronghold in terms of intellectuals. We are not supposed to do that. We cannot do that. We can't afford to do that, because we have a certain respect. We command a certain respect in society, and that respect is purely based on the fact that we are intellectuals. We are not businessmen, or we are not anything else other than capable of delivering a particular set of services to clients within a certain code, and we have a certain higher responsibility towards society also. So there are certain professions like doctors who have to perform beyond their self, and they have to look at the society as a large, as a whole. So as architects, we also have the responsibility. Now with these multiple modes of dilution which is happening in the practice, I feel that this intellectual architect is getting lost. That is something which is worrying, and that trend needs to change. It needs to change in such a way that we maintain our stand as an intellectual and engage with these different platforms which are emerging at the same time. So that is something which education institutions needs to focus on. So they need to give all these tools to young architects. They need to, on the other hand, teach them our role in society. And both these things needs to be balanced, and both of them needs to grow. So right now what is happening is this intellectual part is completely forgotten right now. Everyone wants to make money. Everyone wants to grow. So they are all looking at other aspects of architecture, like how can I grow in these different aspects of going into interiors, execution and those things. And slowly this aspect of architecture and architects as intellectuals and people who are upholding certain kind of values in society. Like for example, let us take Taramatama, if I have to say it, like a client wants to violate on a particular project and they want to build more, they don't want to give setback, they don't want to give fire protection in their building because certain fire norms are very funky. They are very funky. Certain buildings need fire, but they will not ask for a fire certificate. So there are a lot of these things happening in society. So as an architect, you need to bring that particular enforcement into society. You need to explain to your client and make them understand why that setback is necessary. Why you need to set your building back so that you can have light and ventilation, so that other people can also enjoy that natural ventilation and sunshine, and you also get more benefit because of that. How can I compensate that loss in area through certain open spaces by detailing my setback in a different way? Those kind of things, those kind of conversations need to be brought on by architects. And that is something which we want young architects to engage more in. That is what we want to see the profession growing. And slowly when I start moving out of this young architect and moving into this middle-aged role, I'm looking back and seeing where things are going, and I would say it is very exciting. I see young people move into a different direction, and I also see that there is a certain dilution which is happening in terms of this intellectual role which architects are supposed to play. So I hope that people don't dilute on this intellectual part and still, you know, uh, grow in different areas and aspects. So it's a very exciting time to be in, I would say. What I would say is that we have become more focused. We have understood where our strengths lie, where our weaknesses are. We are building more on our weaknesses, and we are exploiting our strengths to the maximum to extent. So that has happened when we slowly mature as a practice, and we are also able to command more in the project because of our experience now. So we have experience gone through a certain, you know, a certain cycle of things, and therefore we are able to stand more strongly and say this is right and this is what needs to be done. And now that we find that our voice is much more appreciated. So architecture is a very slow profession. It will take a huge amount of time to reach this particular point where you have a certain experience, and our education fails us in a lot of ways. It doesn't teach us to, you know, engage with a lot of aspects within the practice. So you will take time to learn all those things, and it is a good journey. It's a very fun journey if you are enthusiastic about building and architecture and the outcome of the whole project and seeing your whole design. Like the best part about being an architect is you have certain things in your head. You have this whole idea that I want this space to feel this way, and you work 5-6 years towards that, and finally when that space comes into picture and you're able to walk through that and you are able to present it to people, that is the kick, that is the dopamine rush which architects get at the end of the day, and that is something worth living for, I feel, because these are things which are larger than yourself. So that is what I would say is, I mean, at the end of the day, we are getting better at doing that, faster at doing that, and more experienced at doing that. And we have grown as a scale, in terms of scale, we are able to, you know, scale up our practice, achieve bigger things faster. So that is something. And if you ask me as a young architect what we faced and how we came to this scale, I would say that it was purely a lot of, you know, failures. We have had several failures in terms of our young startup phase. So almost 90% of whatever we have done has never got built. It is only the 10% which has got built, which has, you know, defined what our practice is. So we have done so many designs which have died. 50% of them will die in the client's hands because they will either run out of money, or they will not want to do that project, or the entire nature of that particular project will change, or 30% of them will die in a CMDA and all these authorities because the land will have some issue, or the CMDA will take too much time in approving that project that project becomes unviable. So, and then there are 20% which will die in the middle stages, wherein that project will, you know, not halfway through that project, the project will change hands, and there are so many things which can happen. So a larger project is always a more uncertain working in. That is my experience. So a smaller project is more certain. There's one small client and there's one team of contractors, and you have a lot of control on that project, and you can deliver it within a certain time period and execute it. But when you work on a larger project, the initial phases of the project are extremely uncertain. So there is a lot of things which can happen, which can, you know, stop the project from happening, or the client might change their mind about what needs to be done, or it becomes financially unviable, or the authorities will make it unviable for you. So these are all aspects which are there in a project, which are there. See, there are two ways of answering this question about authorities and everything. Now, first thing is on the external factor. Why are these authorities existing, and why is it that they function in this particular manner? How can we make them function better? This is a big discussion, and that is going on in terms of the bigger councils and Indian Institute of Architects and everything. And then there is the other aspect of this question, like as architects, how do we engage with them? First and foremost, you have to understand that these guys cannot read drawings. Half of them are from a different background. Some of them don't understand how to read a drawing. Most of the time, the rules are so vaguely framed that everyone is open to interpretation of these particular rules. So as architects, if we can have a visual DCR, if we can have something which is a diagrammatic version of what is written in those rules, then that interpretation and that gray area becomes lesser. This will save a lot of misunderstandings between the authorities and architects, number one. Number two is that most of the times these authorities are very good. They are really good in the fact that they understand that they have a responsibility to perform, and they don't want to dilute the responsibility, and they always want to be safe. That is the reason why most of them are very difficult to go through. They will not dilute the fact that there is a higher setback required than required what is there in the DCR. They will justify their things because they think that it makes the building safer. So your job is to negotiate with them. Your job is not blindly accept them, and you also need to make them understand that the city as a overall requires certain case studies which are out of the norm, and there are a lot of things which are happening in the world which deserve like for example certain buildings which get built in Singapore, or like the big towers which OMA is doing in New York, none of them are capable in Chennai because of the kind of norms which we have, and certain those areas are becoming unviable for developers to explore. So what we are doing is we are straitjacketing the entire development into one particular method of moving forward, which is very unhealthy, I feel. So therein the engagement which the architect has with the authority is important, and that requires patience, and it requires time, and it requires effort. So you need to negotiate with them, make them understand why it has to be in this particular way, change all that. So there is a lot of effort which goes into that. On the other side, COA and IAA especially has been doing a good job in terms of addressing these issues with the DCR and framework which is there. So that needs to go on in a bigger scale, and that needs to succeed well.